and welcome to More on Math. In this video, we will be going over how to compare decimals. How to compare decimal numbers. Comparing decimal numbers is just like comparing whole numbers. Simply compare the value of the digit in the largest place value of each number. If the two decimal numbers have a different value in the largest place, you're finished. If they have the same value in the largest place, move on to the next largest place and compare those values. Repeat these steps until you discover which decimal number is bigger and which is smaller. For example, when comparing 12 and 873 thousandths to 12 and 9/10ths, I start by comparing the tens digit. Since the tens digit in both numbers has the same value, in this case it's 110, I move on to the ones digit. Again, both ones digits have the same value, in this case 2 ones, so I move on to the tenths digit. 12 and 873 thousandths has an 8 in the tens place, while 12 and 9/10ths has a 9. Therefore, 12 and 873 thousandths is less than 12 and 9/10ths, because 8/10ths is less than 9/10ths. Great problem-solving strategy to help yourself be successful is to use a place value chart. One way to set yourself up for success is by using a problem-solving strategy. In this case, use a place value chart to organize and stack your numbers. Decimal points are great for organizing and lining up numbers by place value. Here's my place value chart. I lined it up by decimal, and I've put two numbers in, the two numbers from the previous slide that we talked about. In the top I have 12 and 873 thousandths, and in the bottom I have 12 and 9/10ths. Once your numbers are organized, work left to right across your place value chart, working from biggest place to smallest, until you discover which number is bigger and which is smaller. Start with the tens place. It's a tie, so move to the right. Now check the ones place. It's a tie, so move to the right. Now check the tenths place. Oh, they're different. 8/10ths is less than 9/10ths. So 12 and 873 thousandths must be less than 12 and 9/10ths. We totally ignore the 7 and the 3, by the way, in our first number. They don't matter because we figured out which number was bigger and which number was smaller by the time we got to the tenths place. How do I know? How do I know that 12 and 873 thousandths is less than 12 and 9/10ths? I'm going to practice answering this question in RACES format. If you don't know what RACES means, it means restate the question, answer the question, cite evidence, and summarize. So I would answer like this. I know 12 and 873 thousandths is less than 12 and 9/10ths because the 8/10ths in 12 and 873 thousandths is less than the 9/10ths in 12 and 9/10ths. Therefore, 12 and 873 thousandths must be less than 12 and 9/10ths. If you don't have a place value chart, make your own place value chart using dashes, commas, and dots. Here's an example of two place value charts I've made. Notice I've lined up my place value charts using a decimal point. Which is bigger, 7 and 98 hundredths or 7 and 963 thousandths? Well, I can use my new place value chart to figure this out. I put my numbers in, line them up by place value using the decimal point, and I start from left to right with the biggest place. In this case, I'm starting in the ones place. It's a tie, so I move to the right. Now I check the tenths place. It's still a tie, so I move to the right. Now I check the hundredths place, and I realize they are different. 8/10ths is more than 6/10ths, so 7 and 98 hundredths must be more than 7 and 963 thousandths. Notice that I totally ignore the 3 in the second number at the end because it's in the thousandths place, and it does not matter because I have figured out which number is bigger and which number is smaller by the time I got to the hundredths place. How do I know? How do I know that 7 and 98 hundredths is greater than 7 and 963 thousandths? Well, I know 7 and 98 hundredths is greater than 7 and 963 63 thousandths because the 8 hundredths in 7 and 98 hundredths is greater than the 6 hundredths in 7 and 963 thousandths. Therefore, 7 and 98 hundredths must be greater than 7 and 963 thousandths. Here are some notes you should take comparing decimals. Let's break it down into 4 steps. Step 1. Stack the numbers, each in their own place value chart, lining them up by decimal point by place value. Step 2. Compare the digits starting with the largest place on the left side. If one digit is bigger or smaller than the other, you're finished. If it's a tie, move one place to the right. Compare the digits in the next place, moving right across your numbers. Again, if one digit is bigger than the other, you're finished. If it's a tie, move one place to the right. Repeat step 3 until you discover which number is bigger and which is smaller. Let's try an example. Which symbol makes this number sentence true? If you are taking notes, remember if I write in blue, you should write too, so you should copy this down into your notes as an example. Step 1. Stack the numbers, each in their own place value chart, lining them up by decimal point by place value. Here's my example where I did it on a piece of paper. 2 hints. Oh, by the way, copy this down in your example. 2 hints I want to share with you, or 2 tips. Tip 1. Turn your paper sideways for an easy place value chart. Helps you keep things lined up. Tip 2. Use a dotted line to line up your decimal point. That makes you line up the rest of your digits in a place value chart. Step 2. Compare digits starting with the largest place on the left side. If one digit is bigger or smaller than the other, you're finished. If it's a tie, move one place to the right. So I'm comparing the 3 in the tens place to the other 3 in the tens place. Here's a tip. Use a ruler or a bookmark to force yourself to only look at one place value at a time. That way you don't confuse yourself. In this case, it's a tie, so we move to the right. Step 3. Compare the digits in the next place. Moving to the right. If one is bigger or smaller than the other, you're finished. If it's a tie, move one place to the right. So notice in my picture, I've bumped over to the ones place, and I have 8 ones in my top number and 8 ones in my bottom number, so it is still a tie. So let's move on. Step 4. Repeat step 3 until you discover which number is bigger and which number is smaller. Remember, if one digit is bigger than the other or smaller than the other, you're finished. If it's a tie, you just keep going. So I've now moved over to the tenths place. I have a 0 tenths on top and a 4 tenths on the bottom, and they are different. So I've figured out which one's greater and which one's smaller. 4 tenths is more than 0 tenths. So copy this down in your notes. So 38 and 4 tenths is the bigger number, otherwise known as 38 and 4 tenths is greater than 38 and 12 thousandths, which means the opposite is also true, or the inverse is also true, or if you flip it around, if 38 and 4 tenths is greater than 38 and 12 thousandths, then 38 and 12 thousandths must be less than 38 and 4 tenths. And of course you want to copy that answer into your notes. How do I know that 38 and 12 thousandths is less than 38 and 4 tenths? I know 38 and 12 thousandths is less than 38 and 4 tenths because the 0 in the 0 tenths in 38 and 12 thousandths is less than the 4 tenths in 38 and 4 tenths. Therefore, 38 and 12 thousandths must be less than 38 and 4 tenths. Copy that into your notes so you have an example of how to explain how you know your answer is correct. And that should finish your notes for now. Thank you for joining me in this video, and I'll see you next lesson.